Iga Swiatek has won her fourth Roland Garros title, her fifth major overall, with a 6-2, 6-1 win in an hour, 8 minutes over Jasmine Paolini in the final. Today, a continuation of Swiatek's steadfast Roland Garros dominance that really puts her on pace to become the greatest women's Roland Garros player of all time. The comparison would be Chrissy Everett, who won 4 of her first 5 RGs, which is actually slightly better than Iga, who's won now 4 of her first 6, one of those losses being her debut appearance. But then you get a stark reminder of just how different the times were when Chris Everett played, because she skipped 3 French Opens in a row after winning 4 of her first 5 to play world team tennis, which I don't think Iga is going to do. Plus, we're in a completely different era of athletic longevity. I would be surprised if Swiatek doesn't pass Chrissy Everett when it's all said and done. I think she'll probably be closer to Rafa's 14 than Chrissy's 7, which is a huge range. You know, you have 7 slams to work with, but, you know, we'll see what happens because the longevity aspect is a completely separate conversation, and nothing is a given for Iga in that respect, just like nothing is a given for anybody. But she's on a Rafa-like pace, and I think that's pretty obvious for anybody to see. Anyone who isn't allergic to making a comparison from, you know, men's to women's tennis, which I don't think you should be allergic to. It's okay to just acknowledge the differences between the two, the different circumstances, and everything that's different about them. Not every comparison you are able to make in life has to be an apples to apples comparison. In fact, if that were the case, there wouldn't really be much room for making comparisons at all. That said, there is also the narrative, which I'll delve into now before I get into the specifics of the Paolini final, about, you know, what Swiatek's utter decimation of so many of her opponents and what her dominance actually means for tennis. And I think it's a complicated thing as far as the score lines are concerned. And, you know, the score lines have been lopsided and it wasn't a competitive final. And to give you an idea, Iga in the second round against Naomi Osaka dropped 17 games. Swiatek against the other 6 opponents combined dropped 20 games. So she almost lost just as many games in the Osaka match as she did against everybody else, which underscores what the other score lines looked like, where, you know, Osaka really pushed her in the second round. And that's an understatement because Naomi had her on the ropes and was on the precipice of winning with a match point. So, you know, we did have that epic Iga is on the verge of losing. You know, that was a massive match and a highly entertaining match. But then for the rest of the way, it was smooth sailing. I just want to say this, you know, on the topic of understanding the differences between men's and women's tennis and simply just acknowledging them for what they are. It's not hard to understand why a player like Iga is going to blow opponents out more than even the greatest and the most dominant champions on the men's side. And it's about the effectiveness and the size of the serve in men's tennis. It's simply easier for inferior players to put games up on the scoreboard because when they're serving, they're often able to create a lot of damage more easily than someone like Jasmine Paolini, who doesn't really have that. A lot of the female players against a great returner like Iga don't really have that. They're not going to get piggybacked by their serve. They're going to need to win from the baseline, and it's hard to do that against Iga because Iga is going to be better than you from there. But the point is, like, the serve really dictates that. Not to mention, it's not as if Rafa in his heyday didn't have, like, insanely dominant runs. I mean, Nadal 2008, like, check that one out. Weren't really any close matches there. I mean, the semis against Novak was the closest, but I mean, there was a lot of 6-1, 6-0, 6-2 throughout that run. So it is also possible to dominate on the men's side like Iga has been on the women's side. I'm also not going to lie. The lack of suspense is a detriment in a lot of ways. I don't pretend to believe that it's awesome for tennis and for the viewership and all of that the final is uncompetitive. It would be better if players pushed Iga for just when people turn on NBC this morning, especially because a lot of people who might turn on NBC aren't tennis fans and they're just flipping channels because NBC is such a prominent network. It would be better if the score line was close, so they might stick around and watch a little longer. I mean, these things are obvious, but is what it is. Ain't Iga's problem, that's for sure. It ain't Iga's problem. All right, let's talk about the final. Swiatek was super aggressive. Paolini overwhelmed by the early firepower. Big +1s from Swiatek behind her much improved serve, aggressive returns from Swiatek, and usually just right away you had Paolini on her heels on the run. It just didn't take long because Iga was getting the better of the serve return dynamic. And Paolini, she is a powerful player. She does have a lot of pop, but she really needs to set her feet in order to access that power. Iga just wasn't letting her do that. I thought once Paolini settled into rallies, she looked fine. I thought she hung in once the rallies became neutral, at least for portions of the match. I don't think a lot of the rallies came out of the first 4 shots. Serve, return, +1. That's 3. And then one more, 4 shots. I don't think a lot of the rallies came out of that sequence on even terms. I felt like Iga came out of those sequences in a better position. So this is normal for Iga to bring that level of aggression to the match. Like, she is an aggressive player, but I thought her ability to really do maximum damage off of returns and +1s served her well in this matchup in particular. Paolini looked a little bit pressed on her backhand. Maybe it was Iga's backhand down the line threat, a shot that she set the tone with from the start, a shot that Swiatek executes at a high level. But I thought there were a lot of backhands cross court, backhands in the net where Paolini was maybe trying to do a little bit extra from a pace standpoint. That looked like the weak link on the court for the most part. And also Paolini struggling to protect her backhand return at times. But I do really admire how Jasmine came out initially. And that was an indication that she wasn't overwhelmed by the moment, that she wasn't tight, because usually the hardest part of the match, other than trying to close either late in a set or even more so at the end of a match, the most nervous moments are those first couple games, especially for someone who hadn't been there before. For Paolini to come out, break Iga's serve, go up 2-1, that makes it hard to argue that nerves had anything to do with the scoreline in the end. What ended up happening was Iga caught her rhythm and was just way too good for Paolini. I hope Jasmine made a lot of fans this week. I obviously take an emotionally detached approach to tennis as an analyst and a commentator. But for me, she's extremely easy to root for. And I'm able to see that despite me not really ever approaching tennis from that angle these days. Now, the biggest area moving on from the Iga thing, she moves on now to the tournament where there are the most doubts about what she's capable of, which is Wimbledon. And she has a real chance to elevate her dominance even further if she's able to, I guess, quiet the doubters in regards to Wimbledon and add that to her resume. It would really lift her, I think, to a new level. I think it would elevate her into a new conversation. But even if she doesn't do that at Wimbledon, I do want to talk about a point that I saw on Twitter that I think is a really great point that has nothing to do with looking forward to Wimbledon, but has everything to do with looking back on what she's done since the U.S. Open last year. Vonch on Twitter said, I'm definitely more impressed by Iga Swiatek 2023 Beijing to present than her 37-match win streak in 2022. And here are his reasons. Sustained it for a longer period of time, in arguably better competition, the rise of Sabalenka as a more consistent, more complete player, the rise of Rybakina as a more established player, the improvements that Coco Gauff has made. I mean, yes, competition definitely better. A lot more tight matches won. That's true. You know, that 37-match win streak was, I think, like Samsonova played her close in Stuttgart, and it felt like that was it. Like nobody else. Zhang Qinwen, if I'm remembering it correctly, took the first set off of her at Roland Garros. Like that was it. And in this case, yeah, Swiatek has come through a lot more battles in that period of time. And the last point that Vonch makes here is that she had to regain the number one ranking. Yes, this is all since the U.S. Open when Iga lost world number one and had to immediately wrestle it back, which she wasted no time doing, from Aryna Sabalenka. So, yeah, the run that Iga's been on since the U.S. Open last year is the best of her career, and she should be really proud of it. Congrats to Iga on her fans. On the RG title, her fourth. Hope you enjoyed. Don't forget to subscribe. I'll see you next time.